I see that Harris has started the live streaming, which is great. So
Sanchita, we are live.
yeah, okay, cool. So thanks everyone for joining us today, whether you are on Zoom or you are watching us through the live stream. Either is fine, and thanks anyway for joining us either way. So thanks also to Sunita and Faeza for doing this session with us. We have been in discussion with Sunita for a long time, and because we had a lot of um, you know uh, other sessions scheduled, so and also because of her schedule, we decided to do it finally in February. Thanks, Faiza, and thanks, Sunita, for making time for this. And I think that today's topic is very interesting, because it's not just about design thinking and theory, but how actually they practiced it to create a final product out of it. So that's basically very interesting for everyone to not just see the theory, because most of us, when you attend design thinking, a lot of the design thinking sessions typically is a lot of theory, but and some examples, but this is like an actual product which has come out of this using design thinking model. So um, I would like also to give you a brief introduction to Sunita and Faiza. Harris, if you have the slide. Yeah. Okay. So Sunita is basically, she has been working in consumer growth, startups, and multinational corporations. She specializes in market insights and analytics. And frankly, I know her from a long time because of her work in market insights and analytics. So she has been living and working in India, Singapore, and the US. So she is well versed in the evolving workplace landscape due to the technology. She has been speaking in a lot of international conferences as well. And what she focuses on is how companies can harness AI and digital transformation. So that's specifically recently she's been focusing on that part. She emphasizes the importance of lifelong learning, curiosity, and collaboration, especially in addressing challenges faced by current and future generations of knowledge workers. And today's session is actually a very good example of that. While Faeza is an educator since 1997, so she champions innovative teaching methods. She's a co-founder along with Sunita and also a co-owner of successful private school. She implemented a forward-thinking curriculum emphasizing critical thinking and gamification. And again, the gamification is what you will see in today's case study as well. So, in her senior management role at the international school, she has prioritized skill applications over content acquisition, aligning the education with 21st century needs. Faiza's dedication to progressive education earned her an Outstanding Leadership and Education Award from Education 2.0. So, as you can see, both of them are focused on a little bit different areas. One is more business savvy, one is focused more on the educational insight. A few things for people who are joining us through Zoom. If we can go to that slide also, Harris. So please keep your cameras off and also your microphone on mute. And if you're joining us through live stream, then that's not even an issue. Do you want, for the screenshots and the recording, please do not take screenshots and please do not post any content on social media. If you have to, please take the permission from Faiza and from our speakers, basically. So, Sunita and Faiza, or ask us before you do that. If you like the session, of course, you can post about it, what you've learned. If Can you record the session? No. However, we will be recording the session. We will be putting it in YouTube, in our Design You channel, or LinkedIn. So you will have a copy of the recording as well. And we will also be sharing it with our speakers in case they want to share it at their end as well. If Can I ask questions to the speakers? Yes, you can. And what you can do is, instead of interrupting the flow, you can put the questions in the chat, whether in the chat in Zoom or whether in the chat on live streaming. You can do it either way. We will ask the questions at the end to the speakers so that they can just respond to your questions at the end. So yeah, We have quite a few people already joined in on Zoom and also on the live streaming. So over to you, Sunita, and over to you, Faeza, to take us through your interesting case study. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much, Sanchita. Thank you for the opportunity. And while Fuzzy is pulling up, all right. You guys can see our slide. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
we can see the screen.
All right. Great. Okay. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. Today we're going to be talking about creating and crafting Crackerjack. So Crackerjack is our brand, and it's a compendium of products which is meant, and it's also most of them are experiential actually, to help young people activate as well as receive evaluation on human skills. And so it's really a case study, like Sanchita said, in design thinking, and it's also in our own journey in understanding and activating our own human skills. So we'll talk a little bit more, of course, about what human skills are and how we got into this whole thing. So I'm Sunita. This is next to me is Faeza, who goes by Fuzzy. So please feel free to call her Fuzzy. So our journey started about 4 or 5 years back when I was based in the US doing the insights and analytics role that Sanchita mentioned as well. I was in California and was at a conference. We were talking about hiring young people, retaining the difficulties we're having in training them, retaining them, etc. And that it was a leadership conference. And I happened to say there, obviously born by some recent experience, that give a young person constructive feedback and expect a letter of resignation in a couple of weeks. And all right, I just noticed. Is this better? Am I more audible, Christian? Okay. Yeah, please speak up and let me know if I'm not audible. So what we is I just threw out this line. Give a young person constructive feedback and expect a letter of resignation in a couple of weeks. And unfortunately, it seemed to resonate with a whole lot of people. And, there was a lot of nodding. And then, of course, there was a lot of discussion around what ails the young people who potentially look really good on paper or their CVs are fantastic. But once they come into the workplace, oftentimes we find that they're not able to solve problems or they're not able to the kind of resilience that's required in the workplace, or even working in teams and collaborating and so on. So, Fuzzy and I have been friends from Singapore for a long time. She says that she's the only educator I knew at that time. So I called her at that time and then I said, well, what is education doing about it? Because these potentially look great on paper, great GPAs and a lot of extracurricular activities and all of that, but not able to necessarily perform at the way that companies want them to hit the ground running. And that really started us off on a conversation. Fuzzy's view was that schools and school leadership know about this problem. She introduced me to the World Economic Forum and OECD and their reports, which talked about how what they call 21st century skills need to be introduced into education and how that needs to be a significant part of education. We also talked about why it's not happened. And primary reasons were that the school, there's just no space in the school curriculum at the moment with the huge focus on grades and so on. So we then got around to that's what got us started on this journey. So I did want to say, Sanchita, that we've actually spoken so many times about the skills themselves. We've talked about future of jobs, but I don't think we've actually talked about our journey. So it's been great for us to think back about this journey and putting this together. So thank you for that as well. So one of the things that we realized is that we are actually talking about a problem that few people know about at that time. So we're talking about 2019, 2020. And people were quite preoccupied with the pandemic at that time and really not looking at what else they would add to it. So we had many issues to address. We looked at what are the considerations when the problem is not even necessarily seen as a problem at that time. Today, it's a little bit
Sunita,
different.
can I interrupt? I think your slides are
No,
not
no, no,
moving.
we haven't even
Okay.
again still on my intro page.
Okay.
And how do we, what is our solution going to be? And how do we even teach these skills that are performative behaviors? So these were all the kinds of things that we had to address and come up with. Now we can move on.
Okay. Yeah. So as Sanchita mentioned, we're going to talk about it very much in the lens of design thinking. And the beginning of the design thinking journey is always understanding the user. So before I talk about the user, let's talk about a little bit about how Sunita and me interact with the user in very different ways. And to do that, I'll invite you to think about education as an industry. Now, if education is an industry, then the products of that particular industry are the students. In which case, education are the people who is the industry that's creating the product, which is the students who will eventually become the users of the business world or the corporate world, who will then kind of take on these students into their respective environments, right? And clearly from the story that Sunita had told, there was a huge gap. Now, this had been any other industry, people making mobile phones, for example, and the user was not happy with the end product, then the entire mobile phone industry would have to rethink what their product is. But in education, for a long time, the end user, meaning the corporate world who deals with the graduates, have not been happy with the product. But education hasn't done much in changing it. So that's how we kind of approached it, and also how we came into understanding the users. Me, very much from someone who was creating them, molding them, and crafting them, and Sunita is the end user of that product. And from that way, from that lens at least, we started thinking about what we had to do with regards to those users.
So, in terms of understanding the users, we first, figured out what the ecosystem of education looked like. So, we decided on teenagers rather than all kids, 5 years up, because we had to focus somewhere, and we thought that this is the age group that is pre-college and really needs it, and they have a longer runway compared to college students, for instance, to hone these skills. We realized very early on that parents are a very important stakeholder and participant in this ecosystem. And then, of course, schools and teachers. So the one portion of the ecosystem we left out was government, and that's a whole different thing in terms of advocacy and so on. So we decided to leave that out. And of course, in terms of what we did in understanding their needs and pain points, were conversations, many conversations with the kids. Fuzzy had an endless supply of all her former students. So we had many ideas with them and focus groups. And then with parents also, they were casual conversations. And with teachers, they were casual as well as formal conversations and some focus groups as well. So that was what we did in terms of the background. And then that's how we realized that not many of them actually even realize that these skills need to be developed and need to be honed in the students. And what we need to do was to have a very clear problem definition going forward. They didn't even realize that it was a problem to be solved. So we spent a lot of time defining the problem.
Okay, so talking about defining the problem, the first thing that we realized was our initial problem statement was very superficial. Our initial problem statement was that kids did not have the skills they needed to be successful in life, and now, and therefore, so simple. Our solution was let's provide them with ways in which to get those skills. But it went much deeper than that. First of all, we realized that the schools themselves were struggling because because they didn't have a methodology. How do you teach it? Nor did they have a methodology for assessment. Um, so before we can even think about imparting the skills on kids, we had to think about the research with regards to that. And then even deeper than that was a bigger problem, which is twofold. One is in our grade-centric ecosystem, and which everybody was focused on. There was no space for this. Everybody thought it was not as important. More important were the exams and the marks that kids were getting for the exam. And all of this is something we pick up at some point later on when we started working. Or even worse still, we had an ecosystem of very overprotective parents who, recognizing the anxiety and the difficult world that their kids were going to face, chose to solve that problem by being there for them, providing a safety net, and solving all their problems, which hindered their own ability to pick up skills to deal with life. So their solution, the parent solution, actually made the problem even bigger. Um, so that's when we realized our problem was much deeper than the simple problem statement we came up with. And therefore, we needed to come up with much more solutions, right? So beyond just coming up with ways in which to impart these skills to kids, we also had to decide what the pedagogy was. We needed to make it fun and interactive and game-based, and we needed to come up with an assessment methodology. Um, and only when these were properly codified would we then be able to convince the parents and the schools that number one, it was a problem, number two, it was a problem that could be solved, and number three, that we were the best persons to solve the problem because we literally invented the solution that no one else had come up with at this point.
All right. So once we knew all of that, we had to create a vision, our mission, and the business plan, and so on. So our vision is human beings keep getting better at being human through mastery of human skills. So that's really what our vision is, that human beings keep getting better at being human. Our mission is to provide young people with fun and interactive experiences to activate and evaluate their human skills, which they need to thrive in an unpredictable world. So that's our vision and mission. Business plan. It's funny. I mean, we have lot of painful stories about creating our business plan. We started it back in 2019, and it's gone through so many revisions at I think at this point we don't even really look at it. We abandoned what we had done because it just kept changing. Our mission and our purpose has remained the same, that we are not veered from it even in iota. What has changed is the go-to-market plan, as we've understood the ecosystem and our stakeholders and buyers much better. Our go-to-market plan has changed significantly over time. Our philosophy, we structured it at that point, and we largely stayed true to that as well. We wanted fun experiences, we wanted it to be interactive. We said we wouldn't teach the kids, it would have to be experiential. We wouldn't do bespoke events specifically for schools, and so on. So those were some of the structured philosophical ideas that we had.
So with all of that in mind, it was time to start designing products because after all, that is what design thinking leads us to. And that in itself has been so many interesting stories and so much journeys that we went through. But we'll start with the pedagogy. I realize that's very teacher speak, but pedagogy simply means a teaching methodology. And we had a lot of conversations. How do you teach someone performative behaviors? How do you teach someone how to be? And we started thinking about how we do it as adults. Confidence is one that we always talk about, right? How do you learn and eventually activate confidence? And my parents told me this when I was young, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it too. You fake it till you make it. Now, that doesn't sound like something you want to teach kids, but functionally, that was the basis of pedagogy, right? To first identify what it is you wanted to be, to then identify role models who you thought, already kind of performed those behaviors, and then to emulate those role models. And it would seem odd at first, but eventually it became a habit. And then eventually it became a part of you. And that's how something like public speaking, for example, happened with someone like me, who has huge stage fright and really dislikes being on stage. But it's really through a series of fake it till you make it that I've become a public speaker today. This entire pedagogy, by the way, it's something you might watch in movies, but on a plane journey in 2019, which was the last plane journey both of us kind of took before the pandemic kind of hit us full swing. We were coming back from a trip to Mexico to Santa Clara to the Bay Area, and we had a napkin that was given by the plane, and that's where we devised our very first product. We wish we'd kept the napkin. At that point, we didn't think it'd go anywhere. We didn't think we'd start a business within the next 6 months. Never mind change our whole lives, in which case we would most definitely have kept the napkin. But the next time I watch this in a movie, I will realize it is not a trope and something people actually do in real life. Keep all napkins that we scribble in. But beyond that, we also started thinking about other products that we wanted. We wanted more games. We wanted simulations where kids would be able to have experiential experiences. And we needed assessment tools, both pre and post. For pre, we wanted it to be a psychometric test because we're both huge fans of the MBTI. We wanted an MBTI that matched this 21st century skills and something that would match the way kids thought, which a lot of psychometric tests today don't cater to the way kids think about themselves. And we also wanted an aptitude assessment because no education can happen without evaluation, and no evaluation can happen without assessment. So how would you assess something that is so subjective? So that was the beginning of our product design journey. Um,
We with almost everything that we did it ourselves. To some extent, it was because we just had the vision and had the ideas, and we didn't have a lot of money to spend either, and we didn't have a lot of time to outsource it and to get responses back and work with somebody. So we just wanted to go. So we actually designed our logo ourselves. Both the logos that you see here were designed ourselves. Our website was designed ourselves, well, by Fuzzy actually. She actually learned how to create a website from scratch. So we did that ourselves. Technology, we tried very hard, and but after a couple of trials, we finally found a partner that we were happy with. So this one is largely outsourced. So a lot of things that we have done, we pretty much kind of taken it on ourselves, and definitely used our motto of we can do it. So you'll see, and you probably have gathered, we do something that's our products and experiences are really unique. We had nothing to look at, nothing to fall back on to say, okay, somebody else did it this way. And in fact, to a large extent, we did break some rules, even in terms of the colors that we've used. Some people told us, hey, you can't use multiple colors and it's jarring. And, all big major logos all have single colors. We've said, hey, we like it this way and we think it works for our audience, so we're going to go with it.
So we built the product. I'll take you very quickly through the journey of building the product and testing it. But let's give a bit of context. At the time we got to this stage, which is the stage in which you probably the people around you, is when the whole world changed in 2020. The pandemic hit, and the ability to have any contact with the larger world as we know was very, very limited. So we had to think of building and testing our entire companion or products within this environment. However, I have to say, with all of that, it provided a tremendous benefit because a part of the story is actually the very first lockdown. would have made absolutely no difference to me because I was on bed rest. 1 week before Singapore went into its first lockdown, I had a sudden emergency operation, and the entire first lockdown, I was in bed rest anyway. So whatever would have happened, I would have been in exactly the same space, lockdown or otherwise.
Yeah, and I was in quarantine
Yeah.
coming back.
Yes. So our ability to kind of meet, our ability to, was hampered not only by the inability for us to be in the same space, but for us to be in the same space with anyone, and for the fact that I could not even sit up. So, but yet, I think what it provided us was just time and space to ideate without the pressure of also meeting potential clients, without the worry of having to decide when to say yes or no. None of that was available to us. All we could do is sit down and let our creative juices flow. And boy, did we. I mean, I don't think before this started, if we had ranked our skills, would either of us have put creativity very high on that list. I think we would have both put it right smack at the bottom, and neither of us saw ourselves very much as creative people. But when we actually began the journey of product design and creativity, I think you realize that when you dedicate your time and energy, you're not cumbered down by life and all of life's expectations and obligations. There is an ability to be creative. And to just summarize, in the 1.5 years where the pandemic was in full swing, we designed 10 unique board games. Each of the board game focuses on a different human skill that we want kids to be able to activate. We designed various different dystopian settings in which we want to throw kids into for them to be able to create utopias and through that activate 21st century skills. We designed an entire curriculum. So that's part of experiential products, like a hackathon that schools could use if they wanted to do it themselves. And then in terms of our digital products, we created an evaluation tool through which we did a lot of research. And just for those of you who understand Excel, you might appreciate this. The evaluation tool was first created on Excel before we digitized it. And to get the final result was 151 sheets on Excel, each sheet having a macro formula before each child would eventually get a personalized report and feedback based on the activation of their skills. So all of these huge compendium of products that we now have and are very proud of and we can bring to schools and clients was done because of the pandemic. I don't think we would have done as much nor as quick a time if at the same time we were also getting on calls and going to meetings and doing proof of concepts and other sales. So by the time the pandemic was over and we could actually meet people, we had products ready to go. We were in full swing.
All right. So as you can imagine, gathering feedback was a very critical part of what we were doing. What we did was, because we couldn't have focus groups or bring people in for play testing and so on, the picture on the right is a little bit deceptive, at least as far as the COVID time is concerned.
AI generated picture.
So it was pretty much Fuzzy and I playing red team, blue team ourselves. And, as we would create, one would test, we would take the feedback in. We were also doing, even though we were not really selling our products at that time, we were doing a number of phone conversations with kids and with parents and teachers and leaders, pretty much anybody we could talk to at that point. So we were also refining some of these products as we were going about it. Once the pandemic abated and we could get people over, I think my dining table at home was converted to a game station. And invariably, we would have, at least once or twice a week, we would have people over. They would either be students or adult friends of ours who would come and just play the games. And sometimes we would find things that we wanted to change. But we also realized that not all feedback is useful feedback. So that was an important learning for us along the way as well. And we also saw and we were really inspired and excited about how our audience, adults included actually, were having epiphanies about themselves and about their skills as they were playing the games. It happened to us as well. As we were playing the games, we would have these epiphanies on things like collaboration. I mean, people, we make it very easy. It's just everybody has the same goal, so you all row in the same direction, and yay, that's collaboration. It's much more nuanced than that. And the games allowed for our audience to actually explore these games in a very, very nuanced fashion and thereby understand many underlying aspects of these things, which just turn out to be words for a lot of people as you think about it.
So when we started playing these games with a lot of the adults, including educators, school leaders, and parents, when they themselves realized how much these skills needed, as Sunita said, nuanced understanding, did they start beginning to understand how important it was to let kids have this experience. So one of the first problems we solved, or we realized we had to solve, is the first problems that we realized we had begun to solve by getting adults into the picture much earlier before we got kids into it, by making them realize how much these would have lasting impact on their kids. The example Sunita gave, collaboration, we played it with a bunch of, we have a game in which we have to rob a bank. But everybody has, because they're all thieves robbing the bank together, while everybody has the same goals to rob the bank, everybody has different agendas. And there's no honor amongst thieves. If even one gets caught, they're going to spill the beans on everybody else, and everybody else goes to jail. So they realized how difficult collaboration could be when not everybody might have the same agenda, or not everybody, was all la-di-da and pat you on the back and you're in the same team. How do you work together with people who might not have your back? Became something that people were beginning to recognize. So these were the kinds of epiphanies that we wanted people to experience through the playing of our games. So once we had all that feedback, we put it together, it was time to realize and turn them into actualities. And by this time in Singapore, the pandemic had eased a little bit, and Singapore was one of the last few countries in the world that actually allowed us to. So the law did not allow us to function as a company. Event companies, that got people together, were actually the last to be reinstated permission to restart business. So while the rest of Singapore was back going to restaurants with more than 8 people or could gather in houses, we still could not function as a business entity, at least not in terms of getting people together. So in that time, what we did was we actually printed the games. We actually went to Indonesia and India, which had opened up their spaces and ran our events there. We met schools, we made connections, and we did our proof of concept after the product had gone way beyond prototype stage because of the way the world was at the particular time. But we got such amazing feedback and we had such amazing impact. Two or three of which stick with us. One was a parent of a child who was seeing her. She was a teenage girl in a Singapore school who was seeing the school counselor because of her inability to make friends, and she had high levels of anxiety, and she was just struggling with all social settings. In December, she came to us. She worked with us for just 5 days. Had a series of epiphanies, which her mother subsequently shared with us. She went back to school on the very first week, saw the school counselor, who immediately called the mom after that first day of the counseling session and said, I have no idea what you did with your child in the December holiday, but she's a completely changed person. She's so confident now, and her social skills have shot through the roof, and she's made friends. And it was such amazing feedback for us to recognize that the product, through the entire design thinking stage, because we had to skip a few stages or mess up a few stages because of the pandemic, still managed to create the impact that it did. So we now know that it works.
Okay. All right. So what have we learned? This has really put our own human skills to the test. So these 5 pillars that you see here, from problem solving to interacting with others, understanding the world and its complexity, being resilient, and having impact. These are the 5 pillars that we use when we look at the experiences that we create for the kids, as well as the evaluation that we give them. And we pretty much gone through our own journey of getting better at all of them. As you can imagine, problem solving, we started with the way problem statement, which has been now converted into products which are having real life impact on people. So that's been, that whole takes us through the whole journey of, definitely resilience through COVID and, several things that didn't go our way, and having to understand multiple countries, complexity, age groups. We also had different people from different social economic groups that we worked with. So all of this, we've gone through our own journey of understanding the human skills.
And I think the last stage of design thinking is future directions, and that's where we are now in terms of scaling through the range of who our participants are, through age, through where they are in the world, and also the range of products. In fact, we've just been commissioned to create a range of products for schools in India. So we're going to start the design thinking process all over again once we end this trip and come back to Singapore for a whole different range of products that are much more targeted and providing something for schools, and also by the depth of impact through how long we spend with each kids. And that is our entire design thinking journey that started from a plain journey in which we talked about how skills can be learned through a very fake it till you make it, to today, where we have partnered with over 30 schools in India and in Singapore and in Indonesia, and collaborations with various different education institutions in these 3 regions as well. Thank you so much for going through this journey with us. Let me stop sharing the screen. And,
Thank you. Thanks, Sunita. Thanks, Faeza.
We'll get back on video.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Anyone has any questions? Then you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can just put it into the chat. Let me also check, Sunita. Just give me 1 second. I'll check if there's any questions in the live stream as well.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hi,
Can you hear
Hernan.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. I do have a question. How would you be able to determine if the feedback is relevant or not? Do you set parameters, or how do you perceive things? When is the trigger that the feedback is relevant, or when is the trigger that the feedback is not relevant anymore?
It's a fascinating question, and one I'm sure Sunita will do a much better job of answering from her market research background. But I will start off by giving you that from an educator's background, which is largely where I came from. So the twofold. So feedback in the design thinking process, which is the ideation from ideation to prototype, right? The feedback of the games. It was very tough. Because one of the first things we learned was not all feedback is useful, because people have their own agendas. So we get someone to come together and try out the game, or have the experience, or do the psychometric test. And we realized that the feedback they gave was very targeted to their needs, which might not have been what my understanding, at least from being an educator of 25 years, for what kids needed. Like we designed the psychometric test, which the questioning process was meant to be kid friendly. Um, and when we told people that, they would tell me things like, "Oh, the language is too complex. Make it simple." And I would pull back against that. I'm like, you don't teach kids by simplifying their world. You teach kids by adding things that they would not have seen before and inspiring them to want to go and learn about those things. So the last thing I wanted to do is to change their language to things they already knew. I wanted to put words that in all of our games, we spend a lot of time thinking of the names of the games, and all of them would be something we want somebody to open a dictionary and check the meanings of, for example. So we got heavy feedback on that, saying nobody's going to understand this. Nobody understands what the names of your games even mean. So the names of our games, to give you an example, are Cabal, Concatenation, Copacetic, Carte Blanche. These are things that most average people would have to open up. But we stuck to our guns. But I think the other thing me as an educator, was I thought the most important feedback would be from kids. And I wanted kids to be able to have that room to give the feedback. So we talk to kids between the ages of 13 to 30. And I'll give you one example of brilliant feedback. I told them, hey, what if we're going to have a 40 event? What are some of the things? And this is what I want you to gain from it. Tell me some of the things that you want, okay? And this is what one kid said. This was 23, 24, I think, at this point. And she said, the athletes in school get plenty of time to get their fame and glory, because whenever the team or, they win something on the track or on the field, they get a medal. Everybody knows who the top athletes are. The top scholars, everybody knows who they are, because the top scholars, obviously, after every exam, after every test, they're going to be lauded by the teachers, right? Even those who are talented, they will get their chance for fame and glory, either through stage performance or art exhibition. But she said, what about people, what about kids who are just good at life? What about those who know how to bring their friends together? What about those who manage the conflict between their friends? What about those who have resilience, who don't let bad grades pull them down, right? Pick themselves up, pull their socks up and say, I'm going to do better next time. Sure, they get a pat on the back if a teacher recognizes it, which is not all the time. Sure, they get that. But kids need more than a pat on the back. And we recognize them through the top scholars and the top athletes by giving them trophies and certificates and prizes. But yet, the behavior that we actually want them to emulate for the rest of their lives, all they get is a pat on the back. So they suggested take your board games, turn it into a tournament, and give out trophies for those who win. And we started doing that. So we had top critical thinker, top communicator, top person with the most resilience, and they got trophies which they could take back to them to the schools and share. And so that was feedback, that not something we could ever devise ourselves. It was an idea given by a 23-year-old. So how do we know if the feedback works from an educator perspective? Is testing it out on kids and seeing how it worked on them. And then secondly, whether the parents would appreciate the effect it had on kids. So parents were very driven by outcome. Give me an outcome. I want to see something. But we slowly began to convince parents that you don't need to see anything. You just need to have a conversation with your kids. And if they feel better after their encounters and experiences with our products, then that is the only outcome you need. I don't know if Sunita wants to follow it up with a more research angle.
A market researcher or a marketer's perspective actually would be no different from what Fuzzy said. We probably use jargon like know your target audience well, know their pain points, their journey, and I think that's pretty much what Fuzzy said as well. I think the only other thing I would add is having a strong conviction for your product. So understanding our own strategy, also having a strong belief in our products. Because oftentimes, the feedback we got was conflicting. X would say something and Y would say something else. Z would say something altogether different. Now, which one do we use? And from a quantitative perspective, they're all one person. Now the question is which one we use, and that's where our own strategy and our own conviction on what we would like how our product to look and feel and be experienced. I think that's where that would come in. Yeah, I hope that helps, Anand.
Thank you, Fuzzy and Sunita. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunita. Thanks, Faeza. I don't think there are any more questions. I checked also the live stream because there are about 55 to 60 people who joined in over there, but doesn't seem like any questions as of now. So thanks everyone for joining. If since we don't have any further questions right now, then we will end it here and we'll give back about 12 minutes of your time. And yeah, thanks Sunita, thanks Faeza, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Guys,
Have a
thank you
lovely
so
day.
much. Thank you all.